Hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video with top Australian and international executives. Today I have with me Chris Whelan. He is the CEO of the Wellington Regional Economic Development Agency, REDA. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, very good to be here.
So before we get on to what REDA does, I thought it would be best if you could please start and tell us a bit about your history in the world of tech.
Sure. Well, I actually started my own IT business when I was at university back in Cape Town. Sounds like a long time ago today, but what we did was one of the first incarnations of internet online news broadcasting. We went in every morning at 3:30 and got the news up before people got out of bed, and then thereafter I shot off to university and came back later on in the afternoon. So it goes back probably 20 years now, I guess. Very exciting times, and if I look at the technology today versus then, it's quite different, but nonetheless some good lessons.
And of course that's a perfect segue into REDA itself. I mean, you had your own startup out of university. It's I don't know if there were any of your mother's garages involved, as they usually say. But let's move on to REDA itself. When did it start? When did you join? And when did REDA start advertising Wellington to Australia and the world as an ideal startup scene?
Sure. I mean, our board was formed late 2014. We then went basically through a global search for a chief executive. I'm very fortunate that they chose me. I was appointed last April and started in September. In fact, I arrived on the midnight on the 2nd of September, 3rd and 4th I was at work, and 5th straight into China, as it turns out.
Wow.
We're happy to take folks and to get out there. It's a global business, and obviously we want to do that, so that was immediate. We started looking at Australia more particularly in the tech space, bringing people across to New Zealand, probably the last 12 to 18 months as the business was getting formed.
So let's move then straight into why Australian tech companies and startups, and I guess any globally, should be looking at Wellington as a place to expand, but also to base their startup businesses.
I think there's a number of things, Alex. I mean, the first one is that it's a great place to live. I've chosen to be there, obviously, and so therefore self-reference for a second.
Sure.
But it's a great place to live. There's no question that our lifestyle is second to none. Kiwis, I think, globally are accepted as one of the happiest groups on the planet. And if you look at Wellington on top of the pile, 2014 we ran a survey looking at happiness across New Zealand, quality of life survey, Wellington came out tops. So quality of life second to none. But more than that, it's a great place to start and to grow a business, to start a business, to expand it and then go offshore. We actually, in many ways, are globally native. Because we're a small country, because we're a relatively small city, we aren't trying to base ourselves only in Wellington or only in New Zealand. So right from the get-go, you're starting off with a global orientation. And that's, for me, a very compelling reason right there.
Sure, and you must also be attracting internal New Zealand talent to come to Wellington as well.
Absolutely, and it's good to see. People from Christchurch, people from Auckland. And in fact, we've started coining the term capital drift.
Yeah. People
coming down from Auckland, coming up from Christchurch, and of course coming across the Tasman. Since 2012, we've had an 86% increase in Australians moving to Wellington, which is great. And it's many ways, it's not even a competition thing. I almost see an ANZAC collaboration.
Sure.
ANZACs to the world.
Yeah, excellent. Now, this is a perfect segue into the fact that not everyone is necessarily moving to Wellington to start a startup. There are obviously also exciting career opportunities for Aussie tech and creative talent in your booming startup scene. So what are some of those?
Well, if you look at, the big ones that everyone knows about, the Xeros, TradeMe's. TradeMe founded in '99. 7 years later, sold for $700 million. Xero's got something like 750,000 users around the world. Everyone knows about those.
Yeah.
The reality is that we will always have space for young, entrepreneurial, tech-savvy people in the bigger companies, the Datacoms of the world, the Dimension Datas of the world. But not only that, if you are starting a business or if you're wanting to scale a business, it's the perfect place to be. We've got more restaurants, bars, cafes per capita than New York City. And so if you're a young tech-savvy person and you want to live in a great place, why not do it there? Now, if you are slightly in a different space, you want to be working for a bigger company, that can be done as well. So it actually goes both ways. The best thing for me, as a person who has started their own tech business a while ago, is that you can collide with other people. And the best part about it is they're not actually trying to compete with you. You can sit in a cafe, you can have a cup of coffee, they share ideas.
Yeah.
What better way to do it, I think?
Co-opetition, as they call it. But
absolutely.
Yeah. But you've got a pool of people there that of talent that you can choose from as well.
Well, the best, someone said to me the other day that Wellington has the second highest GDP per capita in New Zealand, after the oil-rich Taranaki. the fact is that in the 21st century, talent is the new oil, and we're sitting on a massive reservoir of it.
Yeah, excellent. So, tell us about the liberalised laws in New Zealand around equity crowdfunding and how they're helping tech startups to scale quickly.
Well, there's a great business called PledgeMe, and it started off exactly that.
Pledge, P-L-E-D.
P-L-E-D-G-E, that's the one, yep. PledgeMe, trying to crowdfund, and they've gone way beyond that now. We don't mind. I know in Australia people are saying, well, hang on, there's a bit of concern about that. We don't mind that. Again, it's a DNA conversation. Sharing, the rising tide raises all ships, is very much part of what we do. And so crowdfunding is very, very much part of it. The government recognizes that we're a small, open economy. We want to encourage people to work together. There's no question that is a great thing. And again, yes, it's absolutely about the capital access, but it's also about the skills access and the market access. People are happy to share those things.
And I know that people in Australia complain that the government doesn't understand about the crowdfunding business and probably other aspects of startups. I mean, we're always trying to get startups happening over here, but I often find in many respects New Zealand is a lot more braver to make things happen quickly. So I'm pleased to hear about the crowdfunding aspect of it, and I'm sure there'll be other people going, oh, we should start up our crowdfunding ideas over there in New Zealand because we're going to be supported by what the government's doing.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because my earlier comment about we're globally native, come across to New Zealand, you're not going to ever be faced just with New Zealand. You're immediately going to be looking at the west coast of the US, you're going to be looking at China, at India, at Europe, and you can then incubate it, grow it, accelerate it, and take it offshore if you chose to.
Sure. So, are there any other things you want to mention about what the government's doing to support innovation in Wellington and New Zealand at large?
Well, I think what we're seeing, a classic recent example, I mentioned TradeMe, I mentioned Xero, there's a number of other businesses. Around the world, there's a shortage of IT skills. We've just launched, Minister Stephen Joyce launched the ICT grad school in Wellington. It's a collaboration across all the different universities, businesses heavily involved with it, those sorts of things, creating the right environment to attract talent. And there's no question that success breeds success. Very, very front and center for the national government. There's a collaboration between national and with local government, obviously the agency that I'm heading up, and business. And I think that triple helix is what makes it a very, very significant impact. And
are there any other factors that make Wellington unique? I can see here we have this poster here, and you can't see it at the bottom, it's cut up, but it says rush hour. And we have a couple of mountain bikers enjoying life in Wellington.
Well, let me describe a potential commute.
Please,
if you're an IT person. You get up in the morning, you've got an idea, you're thinking about it, but you don't want to get on a car and drive.
For an hour.
Or two. And so you hop on your mountain bike, you cycle through a green belt, right? And literally through a green belt. If I walk out of my front door tomorrow morning, I'll be on the green belt in 4.5 minutes, I've timed it.
Yeah.
But you cycle through a green belt, you're into your office, you take a shower, you work, lunchtime you decide to pop out, you go and have a meeting, maybe have a cup of coffee, and in the evening you cycle home. Now the cycle home, I have to say, takes a little bit longer. It probably takes about an hour and a half. And the reason I say that is because you cycle back in that same green belt, you stop off at a craft brewery, you have a pint, and then you continue on home. That's a typical day.
Yeah.
And that's not unusual.
Sure. Well, I mean, lifestyle is such a key thing for people these days,
It's massive.
Yeah.
I had a chat with a chap at Weta Digital last week. Was 20 years in the Bay Area in the US. Took him an hour and a half to get from one meeting to the next.
Yeah.
It takes him 15 minutes to get to work.
Yeah. Well, work-life balance is a key thing, and no doubt one of the big pluses in your favour.
No question at all.
So, are there any other tech trends that have captured your attention and which you think are ideal for the startup scene?
Yeah, the one that actually, and whether it's a startup thing or whether it's a bigger tech thing is a question, but for a number of years people have been talking about the convergence, the singularity, if you like, the human computer.
Ray Kurzweil likes to promote it.
Ray's of course, that's his big thing. A couple of years ago I met him in Barcelona, and the guy's very switched on.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing now, there's a company in Wellington called 8i. It's virtual reality. Virtual reality, and 8i has done great work. They've just raised $8 million in Hollywood for funding.
Yeah.
Tremendous. I think the next big thing, probably the next 5 years, maybe 10, is not VR but AR.
Yeah, augmented reality.
Augmented reality.
Yeah, that is.
It has huge opportunities.
Mixed reality, they call it as well.
Mixed reality, that's right.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is not just about watching a television screen. It's actually education, it's healthcare, it's farming, it's energy, water, food security. And when you bring that in and you look at some of the global trends, that then is a people are too quick to talk about game changers. That is a game changer.
Yeah, no, I'm very much a believer of that as well. I mean, VR cuts you off from the world. AR or mixed reality enhances your world, and we'll come to a point where the augmented reality becomes the real world, and not being connected to it means you're cut off from so much information about the world around you.
That's right.
It'll be like, how do we ever live without our mobile phones?
Imagine a situation where a farmer in wherever, Africa, the north of Australia, hasn't necessarily seen how to irrigate his or her patch of land.
Sure.
But you take AR or mixed reality, and you can have 100,000 similar pieces of information, and that person's got access to that anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
That literally is life changing, let alone game changing.
Yeah, I've seen the demo videos of how HoloLens works and the way you can paint. Showing your kids how to change some sort of pipe or something. You just draw the arrow this way. I mean, it's exciting stuff, and we already have a crude form of it. It's called our mobile phone screen. But when it's overlaid upon what you're seeing, it takes it to a whole new level.
Indeed.
And hopefully we'll see some startups really pumping that along in Wellington.
Yep.
So what do you think Wellington will look like by the end of the decade and well into the 2020s? Will it be a Wellington Valley like Silicon Valley, or a million times better?
Million times better. We've got a very bold ambition. We want to be the most livable, vibrant and prosperous city in Australasia by 2025. So that gives us 9 years. It's a pretty bold statement, and I think it's something that we're going after, and going after hard. I think that if one looks at it, you're going to see strong emphasis on education, strong emphasis on technology, strong emphasis on innovation. And again, I'm a futurist, and the issue of globalization is a big deal. I don't think you'll see Wellington as an isolated city. You'll see Wellington connected to the rest of the world, connected to the Tel Avivs, connected to the Singapores, connected to the Shanghais, and where what happens in Wellington actually makes a difference in all of those other cities.
And unlike in Australia, New Zealand got its broadband network sorted out. So you guys have bandwidth over there.
Well, if you consider Weta Digital and how many terabytes it transmits every day around the world, we've got pretty decent bandwidth.
Sure. Now, as we get to the end of our interview, I always like to ask if you could please share the best piece of advice that you ever received to help you get where you are today.
Yeah, some years ago, I mean, we're all talking about technology, and I'm probably a little bit old school. The chap that headed up HSBC in South Africa made the comment to me. He said, never send an email if you can do something in person. And that is a little bit old school, but I think the point is that relationships matter. Yeah. And that's the point that he was making. And first and foremost, Wellington is a relationship city, and that piece of advice has stuck with me for a long, long time. Yeah, well, especially when your next meeting's 15 minutes away and not an hour and 30 minutes away. Indeed. It makes seeing people in person that much easier. Sure. and more satisfying. So do you have any final messages for ITWire viewers and readers, and for your current and future Wellington-based startups? Well, I guess the second maybe a bit of advice is that it's very difficult to drive change if you're in a comfort zone. Yeah. I would strongly urge people to get out of their comfort zone, even embrace challenge, because if you're in a comfort zone, you're not going to go anywhere. That's it. And if you want to set the new agenda, you want to set tomorrow's agenda, get out of the zone. Chris, thank you very much, and best of luck for the future. Great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.